Welcome everybody to Cosmodore. I've said before that my season 5 video was greatly anticipated, and I've pretty much said the same thing about my last one, but there has been no greater demand for me to talk about something than is the case with SpongeBob season 7. It was loathed by many, it is despised far and wide, and I am here to once and for all decide whether this season was really the nail in the coffin everyone makes it out to be, as I'm counting down all the episodes ranked from worst to best. As always, keep in mind that these picks are just my personal opinion, and I'd love to hear what your version of the list would have looked like. And if you're new here, also check out my lists on the first 6 seasons, the links to which are in the video description. But let's not beat around the bush any longer and dive headfirst into the atrocity that is SpongeBob season 7. Number 50 is a Pell for Gary. Do I really need to go in detail on what this episode did wrong? Because I don't think I do. If there's one episode that got talked into the ground, for a reason I might add, it's this one. Luckily, this seems to be something we can all agree on, so it's not like this is a controversial statement or anything. But what if I told you there is actually some good to be found in this episode? It's got a lot of things going against it, don't get me wrong, like how it is another episode that has SpongeBob getting a new pet that Gary doesn't get along with, how Fluffy's design is abysmal and only gets worse within the episode, how Gary really doesn't do much to deserve the way he was treated in this episode, and that there is a bunch of stuff that just straight up doesn't make sense, like how SpongeBob is suddenly speaking Spanish for some reason, but I like how they brought it back around with Gary using his lasso to capture Puffy Fluffy, since he, of course, has watched the Western before, and yeah, okay, that's about it. I will say, however, that I don't have as strong an agenda against this episode than the lowest points in the other seasons. It's a really bad episode, but it isn't a complete disaster. I didn't find it as insulting as other stuff, just plain bad. Probably the most annoying thing was how super oblivious SpongeBob was here, and how Mr. Krabs suddenly showed up out of nowhere, and how it makes zero sense that Gary being at home is suddenly a problem. You know what? The more I'm talking about this episode, the less I like it, so maybe we should just move on. Number 49, Trench Billy. So not only was the hillbillies forcing them to stay there completely unnecessary, and as a result the structure of this episode also just off, with some weird ending that really doesn't have to be there, we also had moments like this one. What? What just happened? Oh, am I gonna get backlash for this one? Number 48 is Growth Spout.
But Cosmodore, how dare you not put episodes like Yours, Mine, and Mine or One Cause Meal on here? Those were so much worse than this one. I bet you didn't even watch the episodes.
Okay, hear me out for a second, alright? I get that probably none of you would have thought of this one as one of the worst episodes in the season, and I will probably not change anyone's worldview with this video today, which isn't even my intention in the first place, but I need you to understand that this episode used to be the main reason this SpongeBob season has turned me off. Let's look at what really happens here for a second. We have Pearl requiring more and more food to keep her from starving, and Mr. Krabs reluctantly running around getting stuff for her, doing some pretty unfunny stuff along the way, with Pearl just continually getting grosser and grosser, which is probably also the main thing that bugged me about this episode. How it portrayed Pearl as not only whiny, because I've kind of gotten used to that at this point, but also as not even a real character, but just a food-craving monstrosity. All of this episode, except for the chopped liver joke, was just completely pointless to me, and if there's one thing I don't like, it's completely dumbing down a character just for the sake of one bad episode. But like I said, I already know I wasn't able to convince people to not like this episode, and I'm kinda done at the moment anyway, so why doesn't someone else take over for a change?
An environmental theme special doesn't sound like a bad idea on paper, but SpongeBob's Last Stand manages to screw up in nearly every way that you could imagine. It boils down what could be an interesting story, dealing with preserving nature or embracing the necessity of industry, but instead the episode takes the easy way out by making the environmental theme secondary secondary to another evil scheme by Plankton. Similar to Illumination's Lorax adaptation, it pins all of the blame for ruining the environment on a singular figure, when in reality, this is an issue that everyone is to blame for. The environmental short The Endless Summer that the series produced a few years back got this idea right, as it had SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs accidentally polluting their entire city to the point where it is no longer habitable. With the short in mind, it's a bit baffling how much of a step back this episode was with how it portrayed its message. But the issues don't end there. SpongeBob's Last Stand is painfully boring, due to the fact that almost every joke is dragged out beyond the point where it stops being funny. Both songs in the episode also act as boring moments of filler and irritate me, either for being really lazy and annoying, or a missed opportunity. The episode wastes so much time with various gags that only the last 3 minutes of it are devoted to resolving the plot. And by this point, the episode gets so lazy that it forgets what the names of its characters are.
Larry Lobster! Sandy Squirrel!
If there's anything here that I can admire, it's that this episode does a great job showing how dark and gloomy Bikini Bottom is when deprived of nature. The shadows and atmosphere displayed during the last quarter are very unique, and it's something that I would have liked to see more of, but instead we just got a bunch of lame jokes that had little to do with the rest of the episode. All this special does is make me want to kick a tree in anger, which I don't believe was the message it was going for.
Number 46, Yours, Mine and Mine. This is one of the rare instances where I actually have to agree with Patrick for once. Your Krabby meal not coming with a toy is not something I myself would let slip by either. Here's what I would do. Complain to the restaurant owner and demand a refund or something. Here's what I would not do. Pester my best friend about him not sharing his toy with me for no other reason than because you shared it, even though you didn't really contribute to the sharing part from your side. Be completely obnoxious about playing with the toy and then not even learning anything from the experience. I do realize that I may be taking this episode too seriously, but hey, I'm a cartoon reviewer. It's what I do. I'm bracing myself for the hate comments to flock in, because number 45 and not bottom of the list is One Course Meal. Oh boy, I really should explain myself here, shouldn't I? I can completely understand why this would be anyone's least favorite episode of all time, and I will not try to defend the morality and lesson it's trying to portray in regards to suicide here in any way, not to mention that it is more than a little unbelievable that Plankton has never ever seen Pearl before this episode. But what ultimately made me end up not hating this one as much as others do is that it at least tried to have convincing visuals, a strong emphasis on making the nightmare Plankton experiences as real as possible, to make this as gritty an episode as they could, as so to ensure we get why Plankton feels this way. But like I said, the morality in the end was still off, seeing as how Mr. Krabs didn't even get what was coming for him, which makes it one of the worst endings in the entire show, of which we are going to have a lot of in this season. So I think had they taken out some of the more offensive stuff, like the suicide quote-unquote joke, and fixed some of the more major issues like Mr. Krabs being the good guy and SpongeBob barely having any sort of purpose, this might have ended up not as hated an episode as it is. As is, I find myself on the side of people who just don't care about it. I don't find it inherently offensive, but I won't go out of my way trying to defend it. We good? Cool. Number 44, The Great Patty Caper. What a pointless special, wow. This really is the pinnacle of forgettable episodes in every sense of the word. The jokes go nowhere, like that werewolf thing or Patrick's exchange with the mirror. All the new characters barely get any sort of introduction and are suddenly gone when you blink at the wrong time. The whole beginning was a gigantic waste of time and could have been cut out entirely. What I'm trying to say is that not only is this a waste of animation on a special, but even if this were to be cut down to 11 minutes, it would still not make for an entertaining episode, as what it would boil down to is stuff like the break gag, which is kind of funny the first, but just very frustrating the second time. And oh my god, that epilogue was also just so pointless. I did not have a fun time watching this special at all, if you couldn't tell. This is a great example for the fact that just because you could put in cultural references into a show, it doesn't always mean that you should, especially when the show itself barely ever has stuff like that in it. Number 43, Big Sister Sam. Remember how I said that my main criticism with Trench Billies was that it was too stereotypical? Well, I would hope so, it was just a few minutes ago. But this episode is essentially that, but even more dumbed down, literally. I don't like the portrayal of how dumb Patrick's sister is supposed to be at all. And I get the joke that she's supposed to be a gorilla or something, but still, we are apparently supposed to laugh at her stupidity. But there just aren't any funny things she does that would justify doing that. And making fun of her just because of this one character trait is just not something I appreciate in a cartoon. Plus, there was zero effort with the voice actor, and this whole character felt so shoehorned in. It would have been way more fitting if Sam was the complete opposite of Patrick. It would have made for some actual character dynamic. Or if she went along great with Squidward, that would make for a chemistry you wouldn't normally expect. But yeah, well, it really isn't as bad as Trench Billy's, it's not that great either.
2, 3, 4.
Now isn't that exactly what I came to watch SpongeBob for? Armpit farting garbage man, haha, yes, a fun time was had by all! Apart from the fact that this episode tries way too hard to be inspirational and meaningful and to give Bikini Bottom any sort of lore, it is also painfully unfunny and even has to remind you of the fact that Squidward's pipe is about to explode, as if the audience has an attention span of not even 2 minutes, which honestly I can't blame it for since most of it is just complaining.
I thought you said a sacrifice had to be made of the most miserable person.
No, you didn't let me finish. I was trying to say a sacrifice of the most miserable person's house.
No, you did finish that sentence before. This is a false statement, and I'd really prefer you not lying to me, Mr. Dolphin, sir. So if you couldn't tell, I definitely don't have an attitude of gratitude towards this episode, and I also find it super annoying in the beginning that, contrary to Squidward usually just being a very conceited employee, he in the beginning starts nitpicking everything with the Krusty Krab, ranting on every single character, pointing out every flaw with SpongeBob. He turned into me, essentially. Number 41, Whelk Attack. This episode is so forgettable. I have watched it about 4 times in preparation for this video, and if I'm going to be completely honest, I still just don't know what to say about it. The plot of some whelks attacking town, as it turns out just because they had the flu, doesn't sound exciting already, but what they did with it is just forgettable. I could watch it a 5th time and would still remember nothing about this episode. The only positive thing I can point out is that Squidward's snarky comments throughout it are just great, but other than that, man is this one pointless. Number 40, Shellback Shenanigans. This episode already starts off with an inconsistency within the same season, haha. Yes, isn't that fun? We already know that Mr. Krabs doesn't usually care about there not being any Krabby Patties left, so why have that completely pointless beginning in the first place? Not to mention that this is one of Plankton's worst plans for sure, and him confusing the computer in the hospital for Karen is super unlike him and makes him seem way dumber than he actually is. And that is this whole episode essentially. I'm going to have a breakdown one of these days while talking about frickin' SpongeBob. Patrick, SpongeBob's supposedly best friend, doesn't even remember his name in the beginning, which turns into one of the most awkward starts to an episode in the show's entire run. And then into one of the most frustratingly unfunny exchanges between SpongeBob and Patrick.
Well, I don't know for sure how many. I just...
Neatly transitioning into another drawn out and unfunny sequence of SpongeBob thinking of a hiding spot. There's a lot of this in this episode, and I think it's best not to point it out anymore. SpongeBob, despite claiming to be a hide-and-seek expert, doesn't even know the beginner's principle of always considering the most obvious choice first. These are the longest 200 feet I've ever seen. Squidward makes one appearance in the episode, only to show him having his day ruined by SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs cares less about potentially very cost-heavy property damage to his restaurant than the $3 he charged SpongeBob for it.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Are you sure you're sure?
Yes.
Are you sure you're sure?
Jesus Christ, yes, he's sure. Now could you shut your annoying yellow? So if it wasn't apparent already, there's a lot of little stuff that is wrong with the first half and ending of this episode. But to be fair, the part with SpongeBob looking for Patrick and Sandy's submarine was too entertaining to justify calling it as a downright bad episode. Plus their portrayal of the end of the world is actually pretty creative.
Oh, I love this song!
Memes, 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 memes. Number 37, Stuck in the Ringer. So with this one, we have some genuinely creative ideas, like SpongeBob getting dry with the ringer and whole beginning scene, which is pretty funny in my opinion, but starting with Patrick luring him to the thing is where it gets frustrating. Especially when the amusement park visitors turn against SpongeBob, even though he was clearly in the right regarding Patrick here. Additionally, the conclusion is pretty much the same as in the SpongeBob movie, with tears revolving the whole episode, and I'd also like to mention that we get a my back, my face, and even my foot, but no, my leg. For shame, Stuck in the Ringer. For shame. Number 36, Karate Star. This is one of those episodes that tries way too hard to give Patrick some sort of purpose besides, oh, he's the dumb one, duh, but couldn't even pull through with its own premise and went straight back to the status quo in the end, by him not even being the one that caused all the damage. Well, what was the point of all this then? Number 35, That Sinking Feeling. I used to be very indecisive on this episode, because every time I watched it, I just immediately forgot about it, since it is so similar to Chum Kevin's with its main idea, but I think I am now pretty clear about it being kinda bad, and really nothing more than annoying, and like I said, a ripoff of another episode, essentially. Nothing more to say about it than that. The only joke I genuinely had to laugh at was...
Hey, Gary.
Number 34, The Main Drain. So here's a fun drinking game. Take a shot every time they say drain plug in this episode. Of soda, that is. Like Pepsi Max, preferably. Maximum taste, 0 calories. I did enjoy the joke of Patrick getting out his record player whenever Mr. Krabs tries to tell the story of the main plug, and that they were at least trying to give Mr. Krabs and Plankton some sort of backstory again, but it seemed pretty lazy to me to show the same story again with just a few minor changes, and them searching for the plug was also just kinda boring. Not as boring as number 33, The Monster Who Came to Bikini Bottom though, because this episode, while definitely quite creative in theory, lacks the required amount of development beyond Patrick encounters Scary Sea Monster, Patrick bonds with Scary Sea Monster, Patrick and Scary Sea Monster become friends, but society doesn't approve of Scary Sea Monster, which in return doesn't that mean that we in reality are the Scary Sea Monster? So I do get what this episode was going for, and I like that they try to give the Scary Sea Monster a purpose in the end, but not only is that purpose kinda ridiculous, but this episode also just bored me. And Curse of the Hex basically followed the same trend in that regard. I'm glad we got 3 out of these Legends of Bikini Bottom stories out of the way now, because there really isn't any difference in quality between them besides some minor animation up or downgrades. And while this one is certainly an advancement in that regard, with some of the best lighting effects in the season, it doesn't show any real integrity and is mostly just gross. I don't know why they felt the need, with most of these Legends of Bikini Bottom episodes, to design the most hideous sea creatures they could come up with, because it's really unpleasant to look at, and yeah, like I said, the story aspect in this episode is also pretty weak. The comedy and animation really are what puts this one above the 2 previous ones, especially with how the curse turns out to just be a sign in the end. That was pretty funny. Number 31, Perfect Chemistry.
Aw, nuts.
This episode features Plankton turning into a fart. This is not me doing a bit or trying to degrade this episode's oh so amazing concept. It literally played a fart sound effect when Plankton was blowing towards Sandy's nose in one point of the episode. This puts it very high up there on the list of weirdest episode plots and or Plankton schemes for sure. And this episode in general is just another very forgettable one. Except for the bit with SpongeBob's eyes, nothing really stood out to me, even though Plankton and Sandy working together would usually be such an interesting combination. Number 30, The Abrasive Side. Something about the beginning of this episode makes me mad beyond belief. I know SpongeBob is supposed to be sorta gullible and submissive, but man did they crank that level up to 100 here. And while that sorta good cop, bad cop or double persona shtick they got going on here is cool, I would have liked it better if it felt like there was actually something at stake and Sandy wasn't able to just scrape it off again in the end. It made the episode feel sort of empty. The lack of jokes definitely wasn't of help in that regard. Number Number 29, someone's in the kitchen with Sandy. I don't hate this episode as much as others may do, because while that whole taking her skin off thing is kind of weird, it doesn't gross me out enough to distract from the fact that this is actually a quite strong Sandy-centered episode again for once, at least when compared to such blunders as Chimps Ahoy or stuff. It is just refreshing to see for me how even though the citizens are making fun of her, which is not really in character at all, she defends herself and doesn't just let herself be portrayed as a weak chipmunk. Number 28, the scent of money. I found it really funny how Mr. Krabs is just sitting there in his car simply because he has free parking there. The beginning of the episode is great, but that is where the problems start, with Mr. Krabs being the most exploitive and greediest he has been thus far. Number 27, the play's the thing. Oh no, no. Oh no, okay, cool. You probably know at this point that I'm not the biggest fan of Squidward getting unfairly treated in episodes, and this is another shining example of that. He wants his play to succeed and is really excited for it, only for everyone to hate it, turn their back on him, and shift the focus entirely away from it for like the last third of the episode. What could have been a nice addition to episodes like Culture Shock feels like a frustrating mess now, but considering how the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy movie went, I have pretty much erased all my hopes of them ever bringing about a decent acting related episode. Number 26, Summer Job. Okay, so this is barely ever a criticism for me in SpongeBob, seeing as how this is one of the aspects that is almost always top notch, but the voice acting in this episode, I don't know what it is, but the delivery of some of Mrs. Puff's voice actress Mary Jo Catless's lines were really off, especially in the beginning of the episode. It's not super annoying, but along with the lack of any real humor, definitely noticeable, even though the irony of Mrs. Puff having to work together with SpongeBob could make for such a great episode. Also, I've kind of gotten sick of seeing SpongeBob's disguises at this point and would really prefer not seeing one in what feels like every single episode. Number 25, Rodeo Days. While I may not have as burning a passion for hating on this episode as much as others do, I will admit that this one is also so pointless from beginning to end, with SpongeBob trying to get Sandy back taking up about half of the episode, and most of it just being forgettable back and forth. Not to mention that I don't know what happened to the animation in this episode, but both the beginning, the explosion here, and all those strange live action cows all seem to be added in last minute. In fact, all the live action here really take away from the episode, and there doesn't seem to be any focus on either moral, comedy, music, character, or anything here, which makes it just an empty mess in my opinion, which is also why it's so near the middle of this list. Number 24, A Day Without Tears. How do you make an episode focused entirely on SpongeBob crying too much, not annoying? You don't, that's the answer. In fact, you don't even make the episode in the first place if you don't have anything other to present than some very lackluster stuff like the delivery of the TV reporter, which wasn't handled in a very funny way, or one of the most pointless conversations with Patrick in the entire show. The only thing that I really loved about this episode was the ending, which was definitely very sweet. Number 23, The Bad Guy Club for Villains.
It's the atomic flounder! The abomination of a nuclear experiment gone horribly wrong!
Oh Floundy, what have they done to you? I definitely like the VHS aesthetic of this episode, and especially how we actually see Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy doing some heroic stuff again for once. Plus, some of the new heroes and villains are definitely pretty funny. I just would have hoped for a little more action. This is one of those cut down episodes like Gary Takes a Bath, and it really shows. As soon as the conflict starts, it is basically already over, which could have been fixed had they cut out the part with SpongeBob and Patrick popping in the VHS and or added the few extra minutes, because if there's one thing I love, it's superhero parodies. Number 22, The Curse of the Hags, Bikini Bottom, The Curse of Bikini Bottom. Wow, way to run out of titles within the same season. So as you may know, I'm a big fan of the character of the Flying Dutchman, and was really happy to see him at least having one appearance in this season, and he was definitely the best thing about this episode, but I feel like turning SpongeBob and Patrick into actual and not just fake ghosts like in Shanghai could have been executed way smarter than just to have them do their normal shenanigans, but now as ghosts. I would have preferred them having some actual purpose, like having to torment a specific citizen of Bikini Bottom. As is, they were mostly just annoying. Number 21, Model Sponge. What I liked most about this episode was the scene near the ending, which definitely felt like both an homage to the ending of Suds, mixed with a little bit of Krusty Krab training video, and even the comeback of the photographer from Picture Day. This was a great, funny moment if you ask me, and while the rest of the episode is okay, the only thing really worth mentioning otherwise was the drinkable sausage Patrick has. Other than that, as seen on TV was definitely the stronger TV related episode. Number 20, The Inside Job. I liked the secret formula being located in the heart and Plankton then going, "How cheesy," after he finds that out, but that whole transformation bit really wasn't all that funny and was probably also made to kinda set this one apart from the episode Plankton. But yeah, this episode is Plankton. It's Plankton from beginning to end, and yeah. This is Plankton. Which is okay, I don't mind them recycling episode concepts when they have new ideas to bring to the table, and like I said, they sort of did that, but I found most of this episode to be very predictable and kinda boring. Number 19, Cracked Crabs. Okay, so the idea of Mr. Krabs enrolling in a cheapness competition is definitely a very original and fitting one, and I liked how into the whole thing he seemed to be. You definitely got the feeling that there was something at stake for him, but the way he made SpongeBob lie to win the competition, and them then taking away all the furniture which ultimately made him win, I'm not too sure if that is entirely in character, and it also makes the structure of the episode a bit odd, but I still found it to be a rather funny one. Number 18, Grandma's Secret Recipe. While this is Plankton's Grandma's first appearance of only 2 so far, I found this to be by far the weaker of the 2 when compared to season 11's Grandma's the Word, mostly because SpongeBob is again just too gullible for me to believe it here. Like how he never once questions that he would have probably known about his great grandma at this point, at least from his actual grandma or something, and even if he did not even question that, he is more than 10 times his size, but I digress. What I liked here was how all the ex-villainy grandmas of previous episodes are just kind of sitting here, minding their own business, which I'm sure was to save time on new designs or something, but I found this situation to be hilarious. There were some quite funny moments here in general, like how SpongeBob thought that he completely destroyed his great granny in the garbage disposal, but what really bugged me about this one is how Plankton's grandma is then just sort of there to drag him back in the end, which really makes it seem as though they ran out of time and needed some way to wrap the episode up without Plankton winning, which is kinda unfortunate to me. Number 17, Love That Squid. So in this episode, Squidward struggles with finding someone to love because of his ongoing pessimism, and yet once he actually does find her, he doesn't know what to say whenever she's there. Could Squidward be a little less similar to me from here on out now, please? I'd really appreciate it, thank you. Although in all seriousness, I found it pretty sweet that they finally gave Squidward some genuinely sweet moments of actual affection, and I wouldn't mind seeing more of this beautiful lady at all. Could you cut to her now, please? There we go. Now this is real beauty. Number 16, Welcome to the Bikini Bottom Triangle. This is certainly one of the most creative episodes of the season, if not the entire show. With a vacuum sucking up all of the citizens' belongings, ending up on a bunch of bratty mermaids dump, along with characters we rarely see together being there and are trying to get back. This concept, along with some quite clever gags, like how they always incorporate "like" in the sentences and end up helping SpongeBob and company to get back just because they want to know what a mall is, or how that Charles guy was cooking the patties all along. I think the only real issue I had with it was the animation, which at some points was very lacking, especially with how often they have just copy-pasted the trash piles and such. That just made it come across as half-baked to me, even though the writing was clearly superior to other Legends of Bikini Bottom tales. Number 15, Greasy Buffoons. The one joke that I really had to laugh at is how Squidward is literally vanishing here, which is also one of my favorite jokes in the entire season. And other than that, this episode is alright, even though the thought of eating literal grease is kind of disgusting. It just wasn't all that engaging for me for some reason. It's a classic Plankton and Mr. Krabs trying to outdo each other concept that was handled much better in episodes like Fear of the Krabby Patty, and that just wasn't enough for this episode to really stand out. Number 14, Krusty Dogs.
Top of the morning to you, ladies!
I find it a really interesting idea to have the Krusty Krab selling something other than Krabby Patties for once and actually being successful with it. I know we had episodes like the Krusty Sponge or Bossy Boots that sort of did that, but not as episode-centric as here, and I definitely enjoyed quite a few jokes in this one, like the mom and her son that always kick Squidward just for the heck of it. I don't know why that was so funny to me, but it kinda is, and let's be frank here, he is what makes this episode funny in the first place. What did bug me about about this episode was how strange an idea it was to completely replace Krabby Patties in the first place, rendering all those years of protecting the formula just useless, wasted time, which made it feel as though there really wasn't anything at stake here. I got reminded too often over the course of this episode that everything will be going back to the status quo anyway. Not to say this wasn't an enjoyable episode regardless, I just found the story aspect to be the most lacking here. Number 13, Buried in Time. Mr. Krabs annoys me a lot in this episode. Plankton being too blinded by the formula, I can understand, but Mr. Krabs not noticing his own employees and them not even screaming, like what the hell? Also, really, what is Squidward doing here? He serves no actual purpose than to make fun of these objects, which would work had they given him some actually funny lines, but really the only funny moment here was Patrick's dream of what appears to be New Jersey or something, which admittedly was pretty funny. And I also like how they incorporated Plankton in here. The action is what makes this episode for me. Number 12, Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful.
Another beautiful Sunday in Bikini Bottom. Nothing can ruin my good mood today.
Number 11, The Masterpiece. In this episode, SpongeBob disguises himself again. But it's the Danny Saxban costume from Krabby Road, so I guess it gets a pass for that. Plus, I found it pretty funny to see Squidward probably unintentionally torturing Mr. Krabs for his art, or if it was intentional, being so into it in the end only for no one to end up liking it. Not to mention Mr. Krabs' line here.
That's right, Squidward. You do dabble in the doodly doo.
The dialogue in general was what made this episode very entertaining to me, even though the initial concept is one of the most ridiculous ones yet. Number 10, Gary in Love. Okay, so while SpongeBob licking the slime was very weird and unnecessary, and we already did have Gary falling in love before in The Great Snail Race, I found the moments between the two very sweet, and it was just very nice to see the focus on him in an episode that doesn't completely make fun of him just because the devastation he seems to be experiencing feels very real, and the other snail characters are also entertaining enough parodies of TV bullies and the such, and I like that Gary and that snail even reconciliate in the end. It is a sweet ending to the episode. Number 9, Earworm. While the concept of having an earworm is obviously very relatable, I for one can't go a single day without having at least 5 different ones for some reason, I don't think I've seen an actual personification of an earworm in a cartoon before this episode. So that's definitely a creativity plus point right here, and the way SpongeBob goes completely crazy because of this song is very believable, but could have been even more so if, you know, it was actually catchy, which it isn't, but because there's some funny stuff here too, like Squidward then ending up having the earworm in the end, I still like this episode, I really do. Oh no. Number 8, Tunnel of Glove. Why some may consider it weird that SpongeBob, and as we can assume middle-aged man / Sponge, is going into a love tunnel with his boss's 16-year-old daughter. You know what, there is no other way to describe it, this is weird, but I did enjoy how we got some nice, genuinely creepy moments in this episode, which, did you notice that we barely ever see anything good associated with Glove World? They always either not get there in the first place, or are too afraid to go on any rides because they seem creepy, or this time all the animatronics come to life and try to kill them. Someone at the writing staff must really hate gloves or something. Patrick admittedly was a little annoying at times here, but he did get enough decent lines that he wasn't too big a distraction in my opinion, so this was a pretty decent episode overall, even though I didn't necessarily glove it. Number 7, Squidward and Clarinet Land. You know how I said in the first edition of the series that Ween is my favorite band of all time? Well, this is basically what I imagine the music video being like whenever I listen to one of their songs. A weird, trippy mindscape that is just beautiful to look at. There's most certainly a reason this one is widely considered one of the strangest SpongeBob episodes. It has barely any story worth mentioning, but in return shines with some of the best looking segments in all of SpongeBob. I said it before and I'll say it again, it's weird how Squidward always gets segments like these. Number 6, Back to the Past. This seems to be one of the more controversial episodes of the season. Some consider it to be too harsh to have major characters of the show being said to have died here, and say that the time travel stuff is too weakly executed, and actually ends up being a sort of distraction in the sense that it gets too big of an uncoordinated mess, and then there's guys like me, who are kind of in the middle. Part of me really likes the fact that Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy finally have a major role again that doesn't involve them being mindless zombies, while another part finds Patrick to be way too... Patrick here. Can we turn this into an insult? That kinda sounds more lighthearted than straight up calling someone an idiot. You're such a Patrick today. Then again, I really do like the visuals in this episode, and that there seemed to be at least the impression of something being at stake here, but I will admit that the mixture was not executed all too well overall. That doesn't mean that I didn't still find it entertaining, and liked some of their ideas, especially their vision of the future, so for a season as uncreative as this one, I can at least give it props for that. Number 5, The Wreck of Mauna Loa. I found the idea of them discovering a sunken shipwreck, which turns out to have been an amusement park, to be a pretty ingenious one, and there was a lot of creative stuff here in general, like the sign gag and their ending exchange with SpongeBob going, "Can you keep a secret?" and Patrick going, "No." I also liked that Mr. Krabs did cross the line here again, but got what was coming for him, so the story aspect was definitely also very strong. The only things I would criticize this for is that they have only shown the amusement park for like 2 minutes or so, and that Patrick was a little annoying here again, but it wasn't enough to consider it a non-entertaining episode to me. Number 4, Tentacle Vision. Can you hear me? Radical dudes. Hi, I'm Zeus the Guitar Lord, and number 4 is Tentacle Vision. It's like super cool to see all these characters being on TV together or whatever, and the way they make Squidward mad here is kinda cool. My dad always says I drive him mad because I complain about how I was born in the wrong millennium, but I think he just doesn't get it. I'm like way more into AC/DC and Purple Floyd and stuff. Anyway, this episode is cool because it has me in it, and I guess that's cool. I need to go now because I have a network to run or whatever, so see ya later everyone. Well, that was weird. Number 3, You Don't Know Sponge. This episode I initially put very low on the list, and it slowly snuck its way into my consciousness again and again, and I'm still not sure whether I found it actually annoying how little Patrick knows about his supposedly best friend, or if it helps the episode strengthen their friendship in the end, because I think both is present here. I also just really enjoy how patient SpongeBob is with Patrick here. His facial expressions are what makes it funny to me, not to mention that it's super cute to see that Patrick shows that he actually does care in the end, which is the perfect note to end this episode on. Number 2, New Fish in Town. It's episodes like this one that make me think at least the Squidward torture porn got dialed down a little with this season. It's not gone entirely, sure, but at least we got a great one-off character with the right amount of too good to be true, without leaving Squidward in shambles as much as it left Plankton and Plankton's regular. I also like how they didn't feel the need to further emphasize on Patrick's and SpongeBob's annoying behavior. They just acted the same way they usually would, and that gave this episode a nice sort of balance, even though them feeling the need to emphasize on that plunging running gag was kind of unnecessary. It was an enjoyable episode overall. And the best episode of SpongeBob Season 7 is Enchanted Tiki Dreams. So to be on the same page here, Enchanted Tiki Dreams is not an amazing episode by any stretch of the word. Let's say the season is a field of clovers, like really flaccid, ugly clovers, and this episode is the only 4-leaved one. You may be glad you have found such a rare wonder of nature and hold it in your hand and your hand only, but then you realize that, wow, this isn't really all that exciting and or great anyway, and you will probably throw it away and never think about it again. That is exactly how I feel about this episode. There may have been some sweet moments beside the torture stuff in the beginning, and the song may have been by far the best of the season, and it may have been nice to finally see Squidward having some well-deserved peace and quiet for once, but even still, SpongeBob and Patrick being annoying took up most of the episode, and those parts just weren't entertaining in the slightest, except for the occasional
Something Squidward this way comes.
It wasn't bad or completely distracting like other episodes were, but it did prevent this episode from being even better. The sweet moments did outweigh the more annoying ones, sure, especially with how intricately SpongeBob and Patrick planned all of this for Squidward, but it's really telling when even the best episode of the season had some very apparent flaws in both animation and writing, which pretty much summarizes this whole season. It never knew when to keep a good thing going and focus on all the bad aspects in every single episode. When we were discussing season 6, I could look past that. I've gotten used to there being an occasional dud along the way. It got enough entertaining material to keep me from turning off the TV in quite a few instances, whereas this season almost always had something within the episode that made me question my sanity, and whether I was still watching the same show I previously so actively tried to defend and make peace with the episodes I despised for the longest time, but I just couldn't do it. This is the worst SpongeBob season for reasons that go beyond just having torture porn or gross visuals. This was not what stood out to me the most. It was the audacity some of the episodes brought to the table that made it seem as though the writers actively tried to, for the lack of a better word, flanderize all the characters and drive this show into ultimate mediocrity. It's not that there were a few really bad and some good episodes or something like was the case with season 6. This time around, every single episode has something in it I disliked, and saving graces were not only scars, but also barely worth mentioning. I may not have as strong a distaste towards it as others have brought to the table, but saying this is anything other than the worst of the first 7 seasons would just be insane. But maybe you feel totally different about this, in which case I would love to hear what your thoughts on the season were. Let me know in the comments, and also thanks to Nick aka Nicktendo, whose channel I will add to the video description, along with the commentary to this video, which you can check out if you're one of my supporters on Patreon, towards which I of course also want to direct a huge thank you. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to get some more chopped liver from the store. That's all for now guys, take care!
Welcome to Squidward's Tiki Lab.
Chicky.
Welcome to Squidward's Tiki Lab.
Chicky.